United States Navy. I'm David Barker. I'm one of the educators here. And I would like to welcome our guest moderator today, Denise Rucker-Krepp. She is the director of the Directors Action Group at Navy History and Heritage Command. Krepp is an Army brat and a Navy wife who started her career as a Coast Guard officer. Krepp subsequently helped create the Transportation Security Administration and the Department of Homeland Security. She served as senior counsel for the House of Homeland Security Committee and Maritime Administration Chief Counsel. She subsequently became a registered lobbyist and lobbied for the U.S. ship recycling industry and the USS Olympia. In addition to being an NHHC DAG, Krepp is a mom of 2 daughters, locally elected official. She's a Girl Scout leader. She's the National Maritime Historic Society trustee and the DC ambassador for the Military Women's Memorial. Ladies and gentlemen, Denise Krepp.
Hey, so how's everybody doing today?
Great.
2 thumbs up. Thank you guys for joining us. I'm just going to share some information about you guys. Is that all right? Yay, all right. So we have Chief Petty Officer Felix R. Cepeda Tavares, native of the Dominican Republic. He moved to New York City upon graduating from high school in July 2012. He studied information systems computer programming for a year and then enlisted in the United States Navy from Brooklyn. Go Brooklyn, right? Oh, don't tell me you guys are from Queens. Okay, gotta talk about Brooklyn. As a PAC fireman on April 14th, 2014, he completed professional apprenticeship engineering school at the Surface Workers Schools Command, Great Lakes, Illinois in July of the same year. Thank you very much for coming today. All right. And then we have Lieutenant J.G. Cruz, enlisted in the U.S. Navy in November of 2020. Upon graduation from Benjamin Cardozo High School in Queens, New York. So we do have a little diversity, right? Queens and, okay. All right. He reported for recruit training at RTC Great Lakes, Indiana. He then attended the Fireman Apprentice Training at the USS Baton in Norfolk, Virginia. As an undesignated fireman, he was attached to the aft main machinery room, and while on the USS Baton, he completed 3 deployments in support of Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom. In June 2002, he advanced to Machinist Mate 3rd Class, and in November 2004, he was released from active duty and transferred to the U.S. Navy Reserves. So thank you very much for coming today. So do you mind if I start asking some questions? So, Chief, on your bio, it says that you are Chief Felix R. Cepeda Tavares, but on your nameplate, it says Chief Cepeda, right? So can you talk to us about names in the Hispanic culture and how you usually take the mother's name and the father's name? Can you talk to us about that?
Sure, no problem. I want to start first of all saying thank you everybody for coming in. So in the Dominican Republic where I'm from, the child takes 2 last names. So the first last name that the child takes is the father's name. The second last name that he takes is the mother's name. The wife, when married to a husband in the Dominican Republic, they keep the maiden name. They don't change it to the husband. So I have 2 last names. Being Cepeda, that's my dad's name, and Tavares being my mom's name. But the mother name doesn't carry over. So if I was to have a child in the Dominican Republic, my child will have my dad's last name, and it will have my wife's last name as their second last name. And a fun fact about that is when I joined into the Navy, both of my last name were combined because they didn't have the Navy didn't have the space to have 4 names. They didn't have 4 first, middle name, and then 2 last names. So both of my last name was combined once I joined the Navy.
Wow. Okay, so Lieutenant J.G. Cruz, is that the same in Puerto Rico?
Yes, but except the fact that, so my family is a little different. So in the 1950s, my family actually migrated from Puerto Rico and came over here went to New York. And it's all started with like my aunt and her husband who's in the Army. So they came over, they brought my grandfather over, and everybody started trickling in, and my dad too as well. That's on my dad's side. My mom, I'm not too familiar with it, but I know there were a lot of people came from Puerto Rico as well. But my mom was born in the Bronx. My dad was born in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and he has two last names. It'll be Cruz Soto, but when he came over, you know, he's Orlando Cruz, so he just uses Cruz as his last name.
Cool. So when we were talking ahead of time, you talked about the Great Migration. You just mentioned that. You said there were a lot of people moving from Puerto Rico to New York. Can you tell us about that? I mean, what happened? How many people, and where did people move to in New York?
Well, growing up, if you see there's a big population in the Bronx, and you have some population in Corona, Queens, and there's some in Brooklyn as well, because I got family in Brooklyn, but majority is in the Bronx. The amount of people, I can't give a number right now, but I can research it.
Yeah, no.
But right now, you say there's a lot of, we call them New Ricans now, and that's what a lot of my friends call me. It's about 1 million, I would say. We're like 23% of the population now of Hispanics in the city.
23%?
And that's what I researched.
Yeah.
The census says. We don't know, because not everybody. We're so, diverse now. It's crazy.
Right.
We don't know what we could call each other now these days.
Right. Okay. Well, all right. So you both come. Right. So you came just a few years ago to the United States, and your family has been here for about 50, 60 years. Okay. Why did you guys join the Navy?
Well, I joined the Navy. I knew I was going to go to college at first. It wasn't, what I wanted to do. I got tired of school. So I was like, okay, I want to join the service. And it was funny because the Marines actually called me up first. And then he was showing me his car, and I had no money. I was like, I worked at McDonald's. And I was just like, anything looked big to me. And he was like, hey, you want to join the Marines? Look at you get this car. It's like an Intrepid. I was like, oh God. But my brother joined the service before me. He joined in '98. He was a MS at the time. It's a CS now, but it was MS before. So he was a cook, and I was like, okay, let me try. But I know it's on camera, but I don't want him to get a big head.
Okay, we won't tell him that you're talking to
please.
Okay.
But it could be because of him and just life, where it was going at the time.
Yeah. Okay, Chief, why did you join?
So at first, I moved to Brooklyn, New York from the Dominican Republic in 2012. I received letters saying that I could join the military and start doing research about that, and everything seemed fun. So that was something that I had in mind. So I wanted to apply for all of the branches to give me options, to see what options would I have. Only the Navy came back to me saying that they could help me out to go to one of the recruiting stations, because the rest of the branches were looking at my record, my high school record, or my personal record, and they didn't see any of me since I was only in the United States for a year. They didn't have any record of myself. So that's why they mentioned that they could not help me out. But the Navy was the only one to actually help me through the process and to take my transcript from the Dominican Republic High School to join the military.
Okay, so how did that happen? So the Navy says yes. That's a lot of paperwork. What's that like? I mean, so you start the military not being an American citizen, but you are now. So what's it like going through that process?
So the process took me about 1.5 years to get into the Navy, but from and most of that was because my language first. I didn't know English that well to join the Navy. The first time I went to the MEP station, I attempted taking the test. I could not pass because I couldn't read, I couldn't understand. So I had to go back, and that's when I did my year of college. I started doing English as a second language, ESL, on libraries to learn English. Shortly after that, approximately 6 months, I was able to get into a college in Manhattan to study computer programming. And I noticed that since I was over here in the United States by myself, that wasn't for me studying and having full-time studying and full-time working. wasn't for me. So I went back to the Navy and be like, hey, I was here about a year ago. I want to join in. So I took my tests and everything, got to MEPS. At that time, I was a resident. I had a green card. And through the Navy, they had an option that I could get my citizenship if that was something that I wanted to do. And they had to wait a 5-year limited time. So for residents, they had to wait 5 years at a minimum before they can apply for the citizenship. I was able to get my citizenship in within 2 years of being in the United States since I joined the Navy. Now it has changed a little bit since then. I got my citizenship in boot camp. Now you have to serve for approximately a year before you can apply for it, but the Navy paid the fees, and the Navy helped out on the processing to get your citizenship. If that's something that you want to do, it's optional. It's not, you don't have to do it, it's optional.
So where did you become a U.S. citizen?
I became a U.S. citizen in boot camp, Great Lakes, Illinois.
And what was it like? I mean, was there a special ceremony or?
Yes, I actually learned a lot about the United States trying to get my citizenship because there's a minimum understanding that you have to have about the country before swearing for it. There was a test, 10-question test. Once you pass that, there was a small ceremony where you did the oath and you became a citizenship, a couple of pictures, and then back to training because we were still in boot camp.
Oh, okay. So it's essentially like you're raising your right hand and go back and do something else, right?
Very much.
Push-ups.
Well, I hope it wasn't push-ups, jeez. All right, well, one of the reasons we're delighted to have you guys here today is because today begins the National Hispanic Heritage Month. So what does that month mean to you? I mean, what does that, as somebody whose parents are Puerto Rican and somebody who's just came from the Dominican Republic, can you share with us, what does the month mean for you, or does it mean something to you? I guess maybe it's a better question.
What it means to me at a personal level is that it's a learning experience for everybody, since this is such a diverse country, learning about its population, learning about the different cultures. So I'm actually honored for this to be a commemoration to Latin America or to Hispanic America, and that we are giving the opportunity to express ourselves and to let the United States population know who we really are, since we are Hispanics and Latin Americans are becoming such a big portion of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
It means a lot to me. Growing up, I have with a lot of family who's from Puerto Rican background, and just knowing the culture, and especially being from coming from Puerto Rican and learning different cultures. Because my example is my wife. She's from El Salvador, and I was telling her that when I first met my wife in Norfolk, she's like, hey. Let's get some pupusas. Like, what is pupusas? I don't know what that is. It's a Salvadorian, Central American, kind of tortilla mixed with like beans and stuff like that. And I didn't know what that was. So it's different. We have arroz con gandules, the rice and pigeon peas. To Dominican Puerto Rican, we share some of the same cuisines. But stuff like that is just interesting, not knowing it, but educating myself as well, because it's not just Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, we have Mexico, we have El Salvador, Guatemala, so many different, areas, especially, different Spanish, different dialects. And the thing about me is I might be Hispanic, but also, my family speaks Spanish, but I personally, like Spanish is very limited because I grew up, my mom didn't want us to speak Spanish. And a lot of the times it happens because, I want you to speak English because I want you to do something with yourself. But, me and my brothers, I'm the last one out of 7. So none of us speak Spanish. My oldest one speaks a little bit. I speak it because, and as I said, I was a reserve, and also I work with police officers, so I I gotta talk to people in Spanish, you know, you don't have to, you know, let me get your license, you know, do fecha de nacimiento, you know, I have to speak to them, you know, where you live at, I have to do the basics. You know. But with my wife, she helps me out, but I'm still hard-headed, so I'm trying.
Okay. Well, so who are your heroes? And I asked that within the Hispanic community because one of my heroes is my godmother. She's Mexican-American, lives in Los Angeles. And she's the one who said, Denise, you just gonna have to walk your own way sometimes in life. And I was like, huh? She's like, and you're just gonna do it. But so I looked up to her. She was the person I wanted to be when I was 8. So who are your Hispanic and Latin American heroes and mentors?
Well, first of all, it's my father. You know, I gotta say it's my father. He's 31 years in YPD. And that's another reason I wanted to say earlier is that's another reason why I went to the military. It's a good stepping stone. You know, I wanted to do my 4 years, get out, and be a New York City police officer. But right now, you know, I do my reserve duty, but I'm also a Prince George's County police officer over in this area. So that was my kind of like my goals as well. I didn't mention earlier. But my dad is my hero and my grandfather.
Yeah.
You know, anything specific, you know, there's a lot of you know, Spanish celebrities, but I don't have one in particular. You know, but I look up to my family first.
Yep, I do the same. Chief, do you have any to look up to in the Hispanic community?
I don't have anybody in particular, but as Mr. Cruz said, my family helped me out. My brother, my mom, and wife, those are the ones that I look up to, and that help me guide through the process and getting where I am.
Okay. Do you want to talk about the role of family within the Hispanic culture? I mean, I know it growing up in it. I mean, I couldn't do anything without everybody knowing about it. I mean, I couldn't do anything before my mother got the first phone call. So do you want to talk about the role of family within the Hispanic culture and Latin American culture?
Yes, so as I was growing up in the Dominican Republic, I was born in the mid-90s, so still in the Dominican Republic, the mother is mostly stay at home. The dad is the one that gets the bread for the family. So that's how I was born. I always remember the mother being at the house and doing housework, and the dad was the one that was out and about getting the bread. Still until I grew up to come to the United States. That's was my experience about the family roles back in the Dominican Republic.
You want anything?
All right, so the family roles with us is when I was growing up, you know, before my family, my dad moved us out to a different place, the Bronx. But we actually growing up, we used to live blocks from each other. So in the Bronx, we all lived near Fordham Road. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but it's a big Puerto Rican area. We used to live like right around the corner from each other. So the nucleus would be my grandparents' house. So everybody went to their house. Even I remember. I remember it, and everybody speaking Spanish. I'm like, what are you saying? But it's interesting because the nucleus, you got your grandparents' house, and then and everybody goes there, and that's a central point for all the family members to go, and then they feed us and everything like that, and then then once they kind of died, you know, my grandparents passed away, everybody split up in the 90s, early 90s, and everybody started doing it. And my parents actually became kind of like everybody goes every year to my parents' house. So it kind of like does that. And then I kind of do the same thing, is I have everybody, you know, come to my house on Thanksgiving, you know, a lot of food. And also, before, you know, my generation, before there was having a lot of children as well. You have a lot of Hispanic families with like a lot of kids, a lot of family, like big family. My parents, you know, there were 9 siblings from there. And then my parents had 7, and I only have 2 daughters, you know. And, but I kind of do the same thing. My wife stays at home because obviously it's hard. Daycare is expensive. That's another thing. So, but it's kind of like the same thing. I like to be the one working, and I like I want my wife home just to take care of the kids until they reach a certain age, and she can work. I have no problem with that. I'm all about that. I'm trying to teach my daughters to actually work first, and then, establish themselves, and then go out and start a family, whatever.
Gotcha. All right, well, so you both have brought up food, and when I was a kid and I said I had Mexican food, people were like, oh, you went to Taco Bell. Like, no, didn't do that. I actually, had enchiladas. I had just tortillas. I had everything. It was so amazingly good. Do you want to talk about differences in food? Like, what did you grow up eating? What is
Rice.
traditional? Yeah, a lot of rice.
Well, I said earlier, rice with pigeon peas, arroz con verduras, mofongo.
Well, all right, so you have to explain what some of these dishes are.
And then some of the dishes where and also you have one of those fried plantain, the green bananas, they smush it up and then they fry it. You have that. And then I have American food too, obviously. But you have banil, is like a pork. You have that too? So, we kind of share almost a similarity because they're close together.
You do, but let's talk about, before we started, you mentioned a very important date in the history of Puerto Rico. Why is 1918 really important to Puerto Rico?
When Puerto Rico became a U.S. territory?
Yeah.
And that's an important history as well, because then my grandparents were born in like the early 1908, 1906, I believe that's when the time frame. So they're actually, I don't know if they consider them the first generation, and then it brings up from there, because and it's weird because he's basically the first generation coming to the U.S.
And
and I'm like third, and my daughter's second because my wife is actually from El Salvador, so she's first generation coming in.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like my family, we already established ourselves, and he's just established himself in the U.S. and it's kind of weird how it goes in cycles.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you mind if we just pull a little bit more in the 1918 in Puerto Rico?
Sorry about that.
No. I'm a history geek, so I'm going to ask questions about history. What was Puerto Rico prior to 1918? Was it a territory? Was it a country?
Spanish. It was ruled by the Spanish, and I believe it was 1890. I'm going to get the date. 1898 with the Spanish-American War. I believe they were actually. It wasn't considered, but we obviously won the war, so.
Yeah.
Well, kind of released from the Spanish, I would say, got their independence.
Yes, yeah. Well, and I bring it up because there are people here that when you say Puerto Rico, they're like, oh, that's going to be a foreign country. No, it's a territory of the United States. Puerto Ricans are all American citizens. And that's a really, I can't believe I'm saying that in 2021, but there are many people who don't realize that, right?
There's also a lot of people who think we're Mexican as well.
Okay.
It's okay, and I don't take that because a lot of people are not, people don't know.
Yeah.
So I don't take that to heart.
Well, okay, but let's bring that up because I lived in Miami, and that's where I learned a lot about relationships between Latin American countries and the islands in themselves, and really that you're not one group. You can't say Hispanics are one group because you have the Dominicans, you have the Puerto Ricans, you have the Venezuelans, you have the Cubans, you have the Panamanians. I mean, everybody's different, right? So what do you think is the biggest difference between a Puerto Rican and a Dominican? And then I'll reverse it.
Well, the biggest difference is we're American citizens. That is actually the real biggest difference. I mean, I actually went to Dominican Republic when I was 12 and 13. Actually, my dad took me there. My aunt used to teach English over there. She passed away 2 or 3 years ago. But she actually taught over there. But I don't know. I can't say I really understand, but it seems like every time I'm with like a person from Dominican Republic, I feel like we do the same things. It's kind of like almost a similarity. But I went there. It was more of a poor. I felt like it was more of a poor country than Puerto Rico because I went there a couple of times with my father. I know the biggest difference is that we're American citizens.
Yeah.
We're able to fly to wherever in the United States. it's hard, and I give it up to him, I give it up to Chief Cepeda, because he's Generation 1, and it's hard to actually come to a country, don't speak English, trying to establish yourself, and he's doing big things right now. So I give it up to him because he has it harder than me.
Yeah. Well, let's ask, do you mind if I ask you those questions? I mean, what was it like landing in the United States not speaking English?
It was a big impact. We do have a little English school as you go through the courses in the Dominican Republic, but the stuff that I knew how to say was hello, how are you, stuff like that, exit. I couldn't say where is the exit. I remember that because whenever I flew into the John F. Kennedy the first time in the United States, I was trying to get out of the airport, so all I can remember how to say was exit, and that's why I was telling the security exit to help me out and get out of the airport. So communication was the biggest impact, knowing that you, there was some times that I rather go out because I didn't want to try to communicate with somebody. Other times that when I went to eat, I asked for something, I got something else, so I was like, well, it's food anyway, so I'm gonna eat it. That was the biggest impact, and that happened mostly because I moved to Brooklyn to a heavy Asian and Italian population area in the Emilia area, versus if you have moved to other boroughs in the New York area like Manhattan and the Bronx, where most of the population are Spanish. Since I was away from that population, I still have the limitations to communicate when whenever I went out to the stores or something like that.
So, where did you go to seek help? So, if you're in a place and you don't speak the language, who helped you?
So, when I moved to New York, I lived with my uncle, and through my uncle and my aunt, they guided me to a library that was a couple of blocks away, where they taught English as a second language, and they taught the basics for you to learn about how to cross the roads, how to use the public transportation. That's where I learned all my basics from the public library.
Okay, do you mind giving a shout out to it? Do you remember which one it was?
I don't remember. This was in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, 18th Street, 83rd.
Got it. Okay, that's fascinating to me because we have a library here, and the library is over 220 years old, if I remember correctly. But I don't think I've ever heard of us teaching people English or skills. But that's a pretty amazing thing to find. So who were your other classmates? Were they like you from the Dominican Republic, or were they pretty much from every place in the world?
The classmates I can remember, I had some people from Africa, I had some people from Middle East, some Asians, and I remember I was me and another person from Central America were the only Spanish speakers in there. The audience was mostly people that were 40, 50 years old. I was the youngest one in there, being 18 years old. So that's as far as I can remember.
Was that intimidating?
To be honest, it was not intimidating. I felt better in that place because I knew that everybody that was going to the school with me was going through the same struggles. So we shared that common bond, that we were in there for a reason, and that we held pretty much each other back and help out each other, making small, short communications. And I think that's what helped me the most. On learning the language, just because we had to communicate with each other, and we didn't have the option to do it in a native language.
What was the hardest phrase you ever had to learn? I'm just thinking of me flipping back. I had to learn German as a kid, and there were just words I could not do. I mean, I'd look at it like, we'll just keep pointing, and I give up. Did you ever have that with some of the English words?
Many times. Until nowadays, until this day, I still have some of my shipmates that still correct me on things that I don't say correctly, and they tell me, and the way I hear it is like the same way I'm hearing it, but they tell me it's not, it doesn't sound the same. So until this day, I still have those struggles on words out there that I can't just do it.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, I've got a couple more questions, and then we've got some very lovely audience members, so they may have some questions for you as well. What do you think is the biggest misconception that people have about Hispanics?
I believe the race or it's complicated nowadays because I was actually reading, doing research, getting ready for this conversation, and I learned new things myself. So some people will say that Hispanics is where you came from. Some people will say that Hispanic is your ethnicity. Some people will say that Hispanics means that you came from a country that was colonized by Spanish people. So it's all depending what concepts and your education, how you were taught it was. For me, I remember from school that we learned that Hispanics were descendants from Spanish colonies, and that Latinos were everybody but U.S. and Canada, pretty much. So that was my education.
Okay.
I also wanted to say about before you said what is also a difference. What's difference? So there's a lot of dialects. My wife tells me about the dialects is one of the biggest things from different cultures. My wife is when they speak Spanish is slower than my father, who's like he really speaks like really rapid, fast. Is what my wife's telling me. And also, that's a big difference between different Spanish cultures as well. Their dialects are different. Like one will call a word different, like my wife said burnt rice. She said it a different way. And then in the Dominican Republic of Puerto Rico, we'll call it gongo. The bottom of the rice where you cook it, it's all burnt.
Yeah, I mean,
It's different.
It's very different. I mean, the Spanish have the lisp in Madrid. Mexican, I can hear it easier, but if you send me down to Argentina, I'm like, dude, I think you're speaking Italian. But yeah, you're right. It's very different that you can hear it. But people, if they don't know, they're like, oh, you just must be one person, right? Like, no, very, very, very different. Yeah. Do you think the history of Latin America and the history of Hispanic Americans plays into this? I mean, because the United States has had an interesting relationship with Latin America over the past 200 years. Do you think that's kind of colored how people think of Hispanics and Latin Americans today?
Yeah, I believe so. We are probably the most rapid growing culture in the United States at this moment. And as the years go on, more people are going to learn. The education's going to get higher of that than when I first was growing up. I'm just 40 years old, but I'm still young, but my dad's 76, so he's going through, what he went through is not what I went through and what my children are going through. It's kind of like that. As the more education we bring to society, the better we are as a whole.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I think you're right. Chief. And all these people are going to be like, oh my gosh, you can't understand Argentinians. Okay, got it. I really can't. Okay, we have some very lovely members in the audience. Do you guys have any questions for us today? Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, Denise, thank you for bringing up the notion of identity, because I think that's a very interesting and sometimes a provocative and sometimes political concept that Americans don't understand with people of your ethnic backgrounds. And I wanted to bring up this term Latinx because I think both of you have heard that term before, and it kind of had its roots, I think, in academia, but now it's becoming more kind of mainstream. People use that term, well, he or she is Latinx. But then I think there's a lot of misconception on our end, people that don't speak Spanish. They want to lump different Spanish cultures into one group, or they speak Spanish. Well, Mexicans don't like to be called Latinx, but people from Latin American countries, they tend to want to be called from their country. If they're Argentina, they're Argentinian. They don't like to use that word Latinx. So I'm wondering, from your perspective, if you've been called Latinx, and do you like to be called Latinx, or what is your idea of that term?
It's more for him. That's the first time I actually heard of Latinx by researching it. But I guess because of the Hispanic, the male, female, everybody wants to be neutral. But I have no problem with that. That's my perspective. But I don't know if because he speaks Spanish, so he would know more.
That is a very interesting question. I've never had anybody personally calling or asking me if I was Latinx. On my perspective, if we are, I understand that Spanish words, everything has sex. Like everything is a female, everything is a male, and that's why they came with the Latinx word. But in my perspective, if you're asking somebody in English what their ethnicity is, and you want to find out if they're Latino or Latina, a more correct word that's not reinventing the wheel would be Latin American. Are you Latin American? It's already gender neutral for us. It's in English. Versus if you're trying to ask in Spanish, are you Latino? Are you Latina? It's still asking in Spanish. So that would be my perspective. Just Latinx is something that's adding to what's already out there, from my opinion.
So people from South America and Latin America, they can be called Latinx. The people from Mexico, they're called Hispanic. They don't like to be clumped into the Latinx thing, the whole thing. So I guess what I was trying to get at is, it sounds like neither one of you have a problem with being called Latinx. Even Puerto Rico?
Well, I can't speak for all Puerto Ricans.
Yeah.
So right now, I can't speak for anything because nobody ever called me that before.
But
It's
you've
still
heard that
fairly
term
new for
before,
me.
right? You've heard the term
No,
Latinx?
I really never. I had to research it because I've never heard of
I
it.
think it was more academia. That's how I
It
knew
started in academia, but now it's kind of coming into the mainstream.
My wife was telling me it started in college or something. A lot of the college started it, so it's more of a new generation. I'm getting old. I'm still young, but it's just I'm more of an older, and it's newer. It's kind of newer.
Are there other questions?
Hi, I don't know if you've had a chance to see our exhibit on the Navy and baseball, but I think to myself as a young person, and what did I know of the Dominican Republic? Manny Ramirez, what did I know of Puerto Rico? Roberto Clemente, and so I just wonder from the other side of that equation, what baseball and its relationship with America maybe meant to you growing up, and did that give you some vision of America, or was it maybe something you didn't even care about?
Funny question. Big population asks about baseball to the Dominicans. And that is because most Dominicans do play baseball. Most Dominicans do watch baseball. I am one of the few that doesn't do any of those. So a lot of the times when people don't even ask me, do you play baseball? They ask me, what position do you play in baseball? I was like, you finding out that I don't play baseball. So it's just depending on a personal level, I would guess.
Sure.
Yeah, as far as baseball, don't really have any impact on me growing up.
First, I want to say New York Yankees all the way. Bronx Bombers. I still watch them, even though they're on a losing streak once these past 2 weeks. So growing up, baseball, that's what I grew up with. I grew up with baseball. I wasn't the best, but I tried to be a pitcher, but I wasn't fast enough. But I love baseball. We play stickball, baseball, whatever. And growing up, I was always a Yankees fan, watching the Yankees play. Even the dynasty years. Those are my favorite years. I mean, Jorge Posada and Rivera, these great baseball players in the Yankees. It's just amazing. Growing up, yeah, I grew up in baseball, but Puerto Rico, obviously, I only went a couple times because once my dad came over here, and, the airfare and stuff like that, with $7, you're not going to pay for $7 to go down there. So I know it's big in Puerto Rico, and I brought it over to New York, and I played it growing up as a kid. I tried my kids, but they were more soccer. Started my wife's side of the family, because if you think about it, that's another big difference. A lot of the Central America, they love soccer. Puerto Rico, baseball, even basketball. Their own basketball team. And, was it the Olympics? We had a basketball team or something. But yeah, it's kind of different. Talk about different cultures.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah.
Great.
All right, any other questions?
I have a real quick question for you. You were talking about when you're going to the States and you had to learn English. What would you say would be the best outcome for other people coming to the States? Would it be more openness for schools to have it, especially for adults? Because you said you were 19 when you went in there. A lot of others were 50. When should they start this when people are coming in? Should they ask people when they're coming in, hey, do you want to learn English? What would you say would be the best outcome for it?
The best outcome for it would be definitely for people coming into the United States to have better understanding of the language, and it all depends where they're coming to as well. For example, my mom has only been in the United States for 2 years, and she didn't have the luck that I had to be to a more concentrated population area like New York, where there's a lot more schools, a lot more benefits, like free online, free English schools for us. Because when she came in, she moved with me, and I was more towards native populated area, where there is not as many immigrants as there is in New York. So the benefit, I would say, she's been having a hard time finding schools where I've been moving to learn English as a second language, just because of the population of the area.
Yeah. Main reason I asked that, right now we have a huge number of people entering the States, a lot of Afghans. Other people are coming in. As a newcomer to the States, even if you're in a rural area, what do you think could be done to help people out? Besides, it is online. A lot of it is free. What else could help people? Can you think of something that would help?
I don't have anything else in mind other than actually schools, like saying, putting all everybody, people from different backgrounds, or could be the same background in one environment together, because that when you're face to face and when you're not doing it on a computer, you actually have the opportunity to start having small conversations with your classmates and stuff like that. So that's the only thing I can think of, just having available schools for immigrants, and not just English, but also to learn about how to operate in the United States, because it may be different from the place where you're coming from.
Thank you.
I would say, since we're big social media, everybody's in social media. We use social media platforms to gather groups together in a specific area. There's some groups out there in different counties that everybody could talk. And that's one way. Like you have a big Afghan group, they're going to be populated in the central area, kind of like the Puerto Ricans, and everybody come to one, same block, and whoever speaks English could form groups. That's my opinion.
Well, I have one last question for you. We have a month ahead of us for National Hispanic Heritage Month. What is the one fact that you wish somebody would learn this month about Hispanic Americans?
One fact, we're all different as well. We come from, we're a culture within a culture. So we have different heritage, different ways of doing things as well. Like my We just actually had a quinceañera for my daughter, which is, she's 16 now because of COVID, I get to bring it up, but growing up, I actually went to, you know, kind of like a quinceañera, but it was a sweet 16, and we kind of like merged everything. It's weird because, and we danced and everything like that, but just learn if somebody doesn't understand, just learn that there's different ways of doing things within each Hispanic area, like, you know, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, Salvadorians, Mexicans, Guatemalans, Argentinian, because Argentina, as you said, had a big, at the time, outreach. I went there a couple of years ago, and different people, you know,
Yes.
it's different. Especially, you know, you think about it, a lot of cultures, we have a lot of Native American blood in us. Not a lot, I don't know if in Argentina how it is, but, you know, they look more Caucasian.
They had a lot of Germans.
Germans too, as
A lot
well,
of
so
Germans.
it's a different mixture. They speak Portuguese, right?
But no, Argentina speaks Spanish. It sounds like Italian, but Brazilians
Brazilian,
speak Portuguese.
yeah, sorry, I mixed that up. But
Yeah.
Brazilian, and you look at that, you have people from, they speak a different dialect.
I agree with Mr. Cruz's answer, and also within one, doesn't have to be from country to country too. Within one country, you still have diversity. You still, depending for my country, for example, we don't have the same dialects as Dominicans from the south, even though we're only 2 hours away from it. It's just learning a community as a whole is not as beneficial as understanding each person as an individual. And that would be my biggest take on it.
Okay. Well, I want to say thank you very much. So I think we owe a great thanks to Chief Petty Officer Cepeda and Lieutenant J.G. Cruz for coming today and for sharing your knowledge, your expertise, and your wisdom. So thank you very much for coming. Much appreciated.